Hi, I'm John Little, and this is the ShockCast for Saturday, June 9th, 2018, and for the article written on Friday, June 8th, 2018. And it's all about the truth, our biggest challenge. We are beset with lies. They surround us. They attempt to invade everything that we do. They try to divert our attention. They trip us up when we try to make intelligent decisions. And the lies are so much more fun than the truth. That's why the truth is such a challenge. It's painful, it's ugly, it holds a mirror up and shows us that we aren't as strong or as beautiful as we would like to be. So I understand why the truth is such a challenge. But if you want to live long and prosper, if eternity is your destination, you'd better accept the challenge of accepting the truth. Here's a quote to memorize. The truth will set you free, but first it will make you miserable. There's a more pithy version, but this quote comes from James A. Garfield, the 20th President of the United States, who didn't even finish his first year of office because he was assassinated. I think he understood the truth a little too much. And I had no idea that Garfield was such a great guy, which is probably why they assassinated him. He was so right about the truth. When you come to the truth, you must first accept the fact that you are wrong, and that pipe dream that you were living in was an obscene fantasy, and you cannot bear to do that. And if you cannot bear to do that, then the truth is not for you. For instance, take the worst pipe dream ever invented. Everyone is basically good. That is one of the biggest lies ever invented. And it has led to the murder of tens of millions of people. By the way, it's not the biggest lie, but it's up there. It's in the top 10 list. Now, why has it led to the murder of tens of millions of people? Because it is the foundation of communism and socialism. Ideas that led to the slaughter of millions upon millions of people. 65 million Chinese died in the Cultural Revolution. About that number or more died under Stalin's genocides. The Khmer Rouge, the German Nazi Party, Arab socialism, North Korea, and all the other socialist regimes all use socialism to murder millions upon millions of people. And yes, the Nazi Party was socialist. Look it up. In fact, I'll do it for you. I have a link. It's to the Wikipedia page for the National Socialist German Workers' Party. The short form, for the long version of what we call the Nazi Party. Sorry, got all choked up there. Communism and socialism both worship at the altar of mankind's quote-unquote goodness. Otherwise, they'd have to make up a set of gods to worship, and they can't do that. So when the socialists engage in violence, as they always do, they are being violent to destroy those who are blocking the rise of their idea of man's goodness. In their minds, it is the opposition to socialism that is keeping us all from being good, from being what we were inherently meant to be. I guess I'm still choked up. But one of my current favorites is this fracking revolution. I love that one. We've already hit peak oil, but you can't see it because of these frackers. It almost sounds like I'm swearing when I say that, but those who are using fracked wells to get natural gas and oil are all losing money. Why do we refuse to see the obvious, that fracking cannot and will not fix our problem with declining oil reserves? Because that truth is catastrophically painful, so no one wants to talk about it. Talking about it would make it real, and no one wants that. Talk all that you want about the precariousness of our financial system, talk about gold, talk about silver, but the thing that will kill our civilization is the decline of oil. If there is anything that causes the four horsemen to ride, it's that, peak oil. The infuriating part of all this is that we could have avoided this catastrophe if we had been willing to accept the obvious that there are limits to oil. All that we needed to do is invest in our efforts to find an alternative to oil in the 1970s. But we didn't want to do that, and now it's too late. Why do we need to be such morons? And then there's our view of God. We treat him as if he were like ourselves. It's like he is this kindly old man in the heavens who just wants to make us happy. And we tell ourselves that if we are good, we won't suffer. Here is a verse that I will never forget. For I am the Lord, I change not. Therefore ye sons of Jacob are not consumed. Malachi 3, verse 6. Did you get that? Here, let me make it a bit more obvious for you. God does not change. Yet we persist in our belief that God does change, that God doesn't mean all that he says. When God makes a promise, he keeps it. And when God the Father sent his only Son to die as a final sacrifice for our sins, that sacrifice was final. God said that he never was satisfied with the sacrifice of animals. So why are there people who persist in believing that God wants the sacrifice of bulls and goats? Why are there quote-unquote Christians who think that God will accept the blood of innocent animals as a propitiation for sin, when Jesus was the final sacrifice? What's wrong with these people? I just do not understand why it is so hard for people to see the obvious. I get it intellectually, but it's so stupid that I just do not want to be understanding. And I have a little problem with being understanding in those kinds of situations. People, it's time to stop being stupid. It's time to break the shackles of our idiocy and embrace the truth. Our lies are killing us, and it's time to stop the insanity. Please. I'll beg if I need to, but stop being a moron. Okay, let's get into some of the research for the past week. And yes, it does include some pretty stupid things that we need to avoid falling into. The first one is, has dispensational theology corrupted your understanding of God's ways? It's from the Let's Get It Right blog from Paul Benson. I love Paul Benson's work. He writes well, he thinks clearly, and he gets things right. We all get things wrong, so I shall pounce on him and pummel him with the truth should I ever see him do that. Be warned, if I praise you for being right, I'll whack you when you are wrong. And I expect the same from you. Although, I'll do my best to be nice about it. But the biggest problem that I have with dispensationalism is not the pre-trib rapture foolishness. No. The biggest problem that I have is the implicit claim that Jesus was not the final sacrifice and that God intended all along that Jesus would be the final sacrifice. As Paul Benson illustrates in this article, it is time to step away from the doctrines of men and seek anew the truth that is in the Bible. If you have time, take a moment to look at the other articles that Paul writes. He does an excellent job, and you owe it to yourself to get these things right. Here's another article from Paul Benson. I couldn't help myself. It's 20 Good Reasons to Reject the Pre-Tribulation Rapture Fable. And this really is an excellent article, and for me the biggest reason is this. It really is the biggest reason for why I'm against the pre-tribulation rapture. There is no verse in the Bible that describes a pre-tribulation rapture. Not a single one. Yet there are plenty of verses that describe the gathering as happening after the tribulation. Jesus himself said that the rapture would be when he returns at the first judgment. I just don't understand why people refuse to see the obvious. Now, here's another one. Demonic possession is real. Now, this is not from Paul Benson. Demonic possession is real, and victim-seeking exorcism should not be ignored. And this is from a prominent psychiatrist on The World Beyond. This is an interesting one. When I was reading this, I realized something interesting. Catholic exorcists are very bad at their job. Your average Christian does a much better job than these guys who have to go through all kinds of courses and such like. If you have accepted Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior, and if you have been following him in obedience, You have more power over demons than these quote-unquote professionals. But let me stress something, and it's important. Your power over demons is only through the name of Jesus Christ. Get that wrong, and you could wind up in the hospital like a friend of mine did when he challenged a demon in his own power. He almost died. Now I'm going to quote the most interesting part of the article. The part is, Julia, a once-in-a-century case of possession. Now I'm quoting this section of the article. Julia gave Dr. Gallagher permission to write about her on the condition that her name and other identifying information, such as where she lived in the U.S., be changed. Other than those details, he said he took no literary license in telling her story. A direct worshiper of Satan and a self-described high priestess of a cult, Julia's demonic possession was not in question. The core concern for the exorcism team was whether she could leave the cult so that the exorcism would succeed in liberating her from possession. Dr. Gallagher was brought onto the team to talk to her about her ambivalence in leaving the cult and her fears and anxieties about possession. The cult was like a home to Julia, and she was in love with the cult leader. She told Dr. Gallagher regarding the cult's power over her, the sex orgies are a pretty big part of it. But it was not just the sex. Julia had paranormal abilities that did not exist before joining the cult, according to Dr. Gallagher. She directly attributed these abilities to Satan. And, quoting her, I worship Satan. I don't know about this God thing. There's a lot of crap in the world. I don't see how people can believe in a good God. But Satan I know. He gives me favors. Julia reveled in her psychic ability and demonstrated her powers. For Dr. Gallagher, at 3 a.m. one morning, the Gallaghers' normally placid cats went berserk, fighting in the couple's bedroom and had to be separated. Such behavior had never happened before and never happened since. Later that morning, Dr. Gallagher was introduced to Julia for the first time. According to the psychiatrist, the first thing out of her mouth was, "So, Dr. Gallagher, how did you like the cats last night?" I even have a letter from her to a priest that says, "We raised a little hell in Dr. Gallagher's house last night." On another occasion, Julia demonstrated her ability at remote viewing. She told Dr. Gallagher, "We really hate Father blank," referring to a priest on the exorcism team. She explained that it was her job to keep an eye on him, although she lived in a different part of the United States. Whereupon she described the priest at that moment walking along a beach in his blue windbreaker and khaki pants, and he's saying prayers. Dr. Gallagher promptly called the priest on his mobile phone and confirmed everything that Julia had described. The priest noted that normally he would be in his rectory at that time, but on that particular day had decided to say his breviary while walking on the beach. She said, "I worship Satan. I don't know about this God thing. There's a lot of crap in the world. I don't see how people can believe in a good God, but Satan I know, and he gives me favors." The article is quoting the previous part of the article, the previous section. Going on. A sign of true possession is the victim going into a trance as the demons take over the body. The victim of full-blown possession typically will not recall what happened after coming out of the trance. In his multiple consultations with Julia, Dr. Gallagher heard a demonic voice taking over. The voice would say things from Julia's body such as, "Leave her alone, you effing priest. You monkey priest. She's ours." The voice would continue for about 5 minutes, and then she would come out of the trance. Julia would then say to him, "What just went on?" Dr. Gallagher heard the same voice break into a phone conversation with one of the exorcism team priests. Julia was thousands of miles from his office in New York at the time. Speaking with the priest about Julia's next exorcism, the doctor explained that because of a scheduling conflict, he would not be able to attend. The same voice that had emanated from Julia while she was in a trance now broke into the call, stating, "We told you she's ours. You leave her alone." Dr. Gallagher asked the priest on the call if he had heard the voice too, to which the priest replied, "Yes, it's a dramatic case." And it doesn't look like Julia was on the line from the way it's written. Julia wasn't on the phone. So these demons broke into the phone call. That's interesting. Julia feared for her life in the satanic cult, and also worried that the cult leader was falling out of love with her because she was aging, and that's often what happens. And just as a, quote, crazy person might fear being labeled possessed, Julia feared being labeled crazy and being admitted to a mental hospital. But her exorcism, consisting of multiple attempts, ultimately failed because she could not leave the cult and continued to worship Satan. About a year after the last failed attempt at liberation, Julia called one of the team priests and said she wanted to resume the exorcisms because she had cancer and did not want to die demonically possessed. The priest, described by Dr. Gallagher as a very kindly man, told her that he wanted Dr. Gallagher to evaluate her again. And although he believes that Julia always told him the truth, Dr. Gallagher requested permission to review medical records from her oncologist. Julia told him that she had to think about it. He and the priest never heard from her again and presumed that she died. Now back to me. I heard one priest say that the key to exorcism is authority. And I agree. Which is why the Catholics fail so often. Catholics do not have authority. They think that they have authority from God, but they don't. Why? Because Catholicism is not Christian. It's not. Now, adding to all this, there is something interesting. There's some ability that even the Bible says that people can have to actually get rid of the demons inside of themselves. There's an implication of this. I'm not sure exactly how that would happen or how that would work, but it is spoken of like when a person casts a demon out and there's nothing to replace the demon. There's no Holy Spirit. It's cleaned and swept. The demon comes back. So even if a person is able to get rid of a demon through willpower, if that's possible, or if even these Catholic exorcists are able to get rid of a demon through willpower, they come back. Okay, moving on. In this article, Turkish Twitter posts praise Adolf Hitler. Quote, "I wish he had killed all of them," close quote. And this is from memory. The Middle East Media Reporting Institute or something like that. Okay. Turkey is getting ready to play her role in Gog and Magog. These posts in Turkish are horrifying, sick and twisted, just like the Turkish people. And if you think that these are just exceptions, think again. Quote, "Under Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan," who I call Oink Erdogan, "and his party, the AKP, anti-Semitism in Turkey has increased. In early 2005, Adolf Hitler's Mein Kampf was the fourth best-selling book in the country, selling 50,000 copies. It is now available not only in bookstores, but at venues such as Migros, the country's fourth largest supermarket chain, with over 1,800 locations. 35 separate Turkish book publishing houses have printed translations of it by at least 21 different translators. Of these 35 editions, 8 were published in 2016, 9 in 2017, and another one in February 2018. There have been attacks on synagogues and anti-Semitic depictions of Jews on television programming on the Turkish state-owned TV network, TRT, as documented by Memory, Tom Lantos Archives on Anti-Semitism and Holocaust Denial. Turkish anti-Semitic content has spread to other social media platforms, including Facebook, YouTube, and President Erdogan and other AKP politicians have been depicting Jews in Israel as foes and using them as scapegoats in order to rally voters ahead of the general election set for June 24, 2018. Boy, does that sound a lot like just before they went and murdered 1.5 million Armenian Christians back in the early 1900s. That sounds really interesting. And this is the kind of thing that is spreading around the world, especially among the, quote, alternative media. Brace yourselves. Gog and Magog is coming, and Turkey is going to play a big role. And I've spent a lot of time in Turkey, and it is easy to believe that the Turks are capable of all this. Now, this next one connects with this challenge to embrace and to hold on to and accept the truth. This one is Of Two Minds, Charles Hugh Smith, the 3 crises that will synchronize a global meltdown by 2025. I'm going to do something that I don't like to do and quote a large part of this article. And it's the part that deals with oil. Quote, "We're going to get a synchronized global dynamic, but it won't be growth and stability. It will be degrowth and instability. To understand the synchronized global meltdown that is on tap for the 2021 and 2025 period, we must first stipulate the relationship of money to energy. Money is nothing more than a claim on future energy. If there's no energy available to fuel the global economy, money will have little value. The conventional economists assure us that energy is now a small part of the overall economy, so fluctuations in energy prices will have a limited effect on global prosperity. But what's left of global prosperity when energy is unable to meet current demand at any price that consumers can afford? The current economic understanding, quote unquote, of energy and money is an artifact of a unique period of cheap, abundant fossil fuels. It is an article of faith in economics that energy will always become cheaper and more abundant, as the pixie dust of technology is irreversible. By the time fossil fuels become scarce many decades hence, we'll all have cold fusion generators or micronuclear power plants or nearly free electricity from solar panels and so on. This is, of course, complete rubbish. To scale up any energy source to replace fossil fuels will require decades and tens of trillions of dollars in capital investment. And I should remind you, like I said, if we had started in the 1970s, we might not be in this problem. But let's continue with the article. In other words, energy development is a financial dynamic. Technology is only the first small piece of a much larger puzzle. This becomes clear when we ponder the unwelcome reality that the fracking miracle has resulted in $250 billion in losses. $250 billion was lost by the fracking industry. What does that tell you? But let's continue. You mean all those companies lost money exploiting the miracle technologies of fracking? My point is profits are not guaranteed in an industry that requires trillions in new investment before it earns a positive return. The financial graveyard is littered with the carcasses of costly energy technologies that were supposed to save industrial civilization with some new clean source of essentially limitless energy. Conventional economists also tend to overlook the impact of rising domestic consumption of oil exporting nations. A funny thing happens when domestic demand rises with population and prosperity. The exporting nation may pump the same quantity of oil, but there's no longer much left to export. Saudi Arabia is exporting less oil than it has before because their population is consuming more of it. Funny how that happens. So, back to me. Well, that was also me as well. For me, that is the most important part of the article. But the other two crises will combine for a perfect storm, and I recommend that you read about those two other crises. Again, the companies doing fracking have lost $250 billion doing fracking. Does that tell you something? Okay. Then there's another one. The strongest flashing red light since 2008. Will oil shock trigger the next recession? From Zero Hedge. It was an oil shock that lit the fuse for the Great Recession. And you can bet that it will be the same this time. And you can bet that this one will uncover the underlying poverty of the fracking revolution. Again, think $250 billion in losses. Fracking will never make money because it can't. And when the final shock hits, we will all be forced to see that we passed peak oil years ago. Why do we always have to be so stupid? Okay, and then to add more insult to this injury, this article, the unbelievable amount of frack sand or fracking sand consumed by the U.S. shale oil industry. And this is from SRS Rocco Report. If you want to know one of the reasons why oil companies are losing money when they do fracking, this is one big reason. You cannot make money fracking for oil. We have proved this for years and years, but no one seems to be interested in evidence. Just think about how much the tons of fracking sand just to get a little bit of oil out of the ground. Now, this should chill you a bit, and this is from Vice. Your phone is listening, and it's not paranoia. Your cell phone is listening to what you say, even when you aren't using it. When you press the power button on your cell phone to put it on standby, it is still recording what you say, and yes, recording, not just listening, and processing the words that it hears. The writer of this article stumbled over this possibility and did a test to see if it was true. Quote, with this in mind, I decided to try an experiment. Twice a day for 5 days, I tried saying a bunch of phrases that could theoretically be used as triggers. Phrases like, I'm thinking about going back to university and I need some cheap shirts for work. Then I carefully monitored the sponsored posts on Facebook for any changes. And in parentheses he says, I'd never seen this ad for quality clothing until I told my phone I needed shirts while it was on standby. The changes came literally overnight. Suddenly I was being told mid-semester courses at various universities and how certain brands were offering cheap clothing. A private conversation with a friend about how I'd run out of data led to an ad about cheap 20 gigabyte data plans, and although they were all good deals, the whole thing was eye-opening and utterly terrifying. Close quote. So, if you don't want your cell phone recording what you are saying, you either need to get a quote-unquote dumb phone, or you need to a soundproof case to put your cell phone in, which means that then, of course, you wouldn't be able to hear your phone call when the calls come in. The bottom line is that cell phones are listening to everything that you say. Everything. And not just your phone. Every phone in hearing distance is listening to you. At the moment, this might not seem to be a serious security issue, at least for those in the US or Europe. However, that might change. The time is coming when you will need to hide what you are saying from the government. When that happens, you had better not have a cell phone within 20 feet or 7 meters of anything that you say that might be dangerous. Here's looking at you for those of you who are in the UK or the rest of Europe. I'm just saying. This other one is an interesting case study in not jumping to conclusions. This article is troubling U.S. Navy review finds widespread shortfalls in basic seamanship. Quote, do you remember, I'm sorry, not quoting, it's just me. Do you remember the 2 U.S. Navy destroyers that were involved in collisions last year? Do you also remember the hysteria and the claims that some kind of electronic warfare were involved? Right. This had nothing to do with the made-up ideas about scalar waves or directed energy weapons or some hacking or whatever. This was an issue, as I thought at the time, of training and training only. I should say I suspected at the time. It is time to stop being hysterical about things like this and wait for the information to arrive. The alternative media is full of morons looking to make a buck by injecting hysteria into their narratives. It's time to stop being hysterical, at least about the things that don't deserve to be hysterical. They are making money while you lose your mind. So stop listening to those people that are always jumping to the most hysterical possibility for some event. And I'm betting that you know who I mean. All right. This one's an interesting one. It's modern civil war without guns, so far. Monty Pellerin's war. This is a quote of a quote about the American Civil War that America is already fighting. Yes, and I mean that. Already. Right now. Quote, "How do civil wars happen? Two or more sides disagree on who runs the country. And they can't settle the question through elections because they don't even agree that elections are how you decide who's in charge." That's the basic issue here. Who decides who runs the country? When you hate each other but accept the election results, you have a country. When you stop accepting election results, you have a countdown to a civil war. The Mueller investigation is about removing President Trump from office and overturning the results of an election. And we all know that. But it's not the first time they've done this. The first time a Republican president was elected this century, they said he didn't really win. The Supreme Court gave him the election. There's a pattern here. What do sure odds of the Democrats rejecting the next Republican president really mean? It means they don't accept the results of any election that they don't win. It means they don't believe that transfers of power in this country are determined by elections. That's a civil war. There's no shooting, at least not unless you count the attempt to kill a bunch of Republicans at a charity baseball game practice, but the Democrats have rejected our system of government. This isn't dissent. It's not disagreement. You can hate the other party. You can think they're the worst thing that ever happened to the country, but then you work harder to win the next election. When you consistently reject the results of elections that you don't win, what you want is a dictatorship. Your very own dictatorship. The only legitimate exercise of power in this country, the United States, according to Democrats, is its own. Whenever Republicans exercise power, it is, to the Democrats, inherently illegitimate. Close quote. So my question, when will the shooting begin? It's hard to say. In one sense, it has already begun. What utter insanity. Now, on to Bilderberg. This one is Bilderberg globalists concerned about populist uprising in Europe. I love it when the elites talk about populism, as if it were something other than democracy. To the elites, democracy is fine as long as everyone does what they tell them to do. It's only when an election or decision goes against their satanic wishes that it suddenly becomes populism. The one good thing about all this is that these people are almost universally dumber than a box of rocks and a bag of hammers. Seriously. Here's an example. Quote, in 2009, Bilderberg chairman Etienne Davignon even bragged about how the euro single currency was a brainchild of the Bilderberg group. Close quote. The euro is one of the most poorly designed financial instruments ever. And these idiots were bragging about it. So, there is a silver lining to Bilderberg. They're almost all morons. Of course, They're morons with power and allegiance to Satan, but they're still morons. It's one of the few times when being a moron is a good thing. This one is an article by Walter E. Williams, and it's an interesting one, and that I've experienced myself. Past versus present Americans. There is a deep-seated sickness in America. I sensed it myself when I returned to the U.S. after a 14-year absence in 2006. And the writer of this piece has seen an even greater change in his 82 years. Here's a quote. Guns haven't changed. People have changed. Behavior that is acceptable from today's young people was not accepted yesteryear. For those of us who are 65 or older, or even in their 50s, that's me, as they are in some assaults on teachers were not routine, as they are in some cities. For example, in Baltimore, an average of 4 teachers and staff members were assaulted each school day in 2010. And more than 300 school staff members filed workers' compensation claims in a year because of injuries received through assaults or altercations on the job as teachers. In Philadelphia, 690 teachers were assaulted in 2010, and in a 5-year period, 4,000 were. In that city's schools, according to the Philadelphia Inquirer, on an average day, 25 students, teachers, or other staff members are beaten, robbed, sexually assaulted, or victims of other violent crimes. That doesn't even include thousands more who are extorted, threatened, or bullied in a school year. Close quote. And then there's this quote. During earlier periods, people could simply walk into a hardware store and buy a rifle. Buying a rifle or pistol through a mail-order catalog, such as Sears and Roebuck Company. And I remember those from way back in the 70s. It was easy. Often at 12th or their 14th birthday present, often a 12th or 14th birthday present was a shiny new .22 caliber rifle given to a boy by his father. Close quote. And I remember those catalogs, Sears and Roebuck. Look at the rifles you could buy. And if you're on the shooting team, you could take your guns into school. In fact, kids often brought their guns to show off to other kids. And the biggest problem with that was the distraction that this caused from doing your schoolwork. There were no restrictions on guns. People didn't go out and kill each other with them. And you could leave your house unlocked and never worry if someone was going to break in and steal your stuff. America has become a dark and evil place. And people don't want to ask why. And I don't understand that. Well, 2 weeks ago, Tommy Robinson was arrested. I think it was at least 2 weeks ago. And what the UK did to Tommy Robinson is sick and twisted. He did not break the law in any way, and his summary imprisonment, his just going to throw him in prison without any recourse, without any lawyer, without any time or ability to make a defense, is a vile and evil act of a psychopathic judge and a psychopathic government in the UK. Worse, Tommy will probably be murdered in jail. And that murder will be on the hands of the British government. More importantly, it's a symbol and a symptom of what is happening, first in the UK and then elsewhere. Welcome to the pathological, psychopathic, diabolical Islamization of your country, wherever you are. And this article, Britain has a problem with free speech. And I actually got this on Imgur. I can't believe I'm putting an Imgur post here, but this is so good it goes here. Did you know that 4,000 people a year are arrested for being grossly offensive under Section 127 of the Communications Act of 2003 in Britain? That's right. 4,000 arrested every year. to my dear British friends, your country is being run by morons. It's incredible. I can hardly believe it. Then, this one actually is back to Tommy Robinson, and this is Live with Ezra. It's a YouTube video. Shock video shows other journalists filming same trial as Tommy Robinson. But of course, did you see them get arrested? No. This is an evil thing this is the evil thing about all this. Tommy was arrested for doing less than what others were doing. The hypocrisy of this is utterly astounding. And Tommy was given a kangaroo court without his lawyer, without an opportunity for a proper defense, and thrown in jail, where he will probably be killed. And the judge knew that he would probably be killed. In fact, he actually indicated that. Now, we turn to a bit of prophecy from Isaiah 19. I don't normally talk about this on a YouTube video or in the ShockCast, but this is important. This article is Egyptians' options to counter Ethiopia's Grand Dam run dry. It's from the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, or the GERD. This article means that Egypt is finished. Ethiopia has been playing a very elaborate diplomatic game and even talked about beginning to fill the dam in 2015. But they didn't. It was a way of making Egypt think that they were closer to completing the dam than they were. And now that they are close to completion, Ethiopia isn't talking about when it will be completed or when the dam will begin to fill. And they're making all kinds of promises about how they will make sure that Egypt isn't harmed. Right. Remember, Ethiopia is ruled by by a really disgusting government. And they will fill this dam in 3 years or less. And that means that Egypt will die. Ethiopia is desperate for the electricity to come online, and any delay will be unacceptable to them. And they will lie and lie and lie and lie and lie while Egyptians die. It will be that simple. I truly hope that you'll be ready for all of this. The key is embracing the truth. As I end every one of my articles, is from Proverbs 22:3. A prudent man foreseeth the evil and hideth himself, but the simple pass on and are punished. Now, if you find a flaw in my reasoning or have a question or wish to add your own viewpoint, leave a comment in the comment section below. And please subscribe. Please subscribe. Click below and subscribe so that you catch every one of the YouTube videos, and of course subscribe to the Shock Letter that comes out, Lord willing, every Friday. And please, also, read the book, Ezekiel's Fire. And you can find it at ezekielsfire.com. No punctuation, except for the dot in .com. Hopefully, if you take it to heart, and if I'm right, it will probably save your life, if you do the preparations. Now, my hope is that I'm wrong. My hope is that you will read that book and you'll find something wrong in what I said, and you'll be able to prove it to me. And I will rest a little easier about the future. The problem is that until that moment, until you can prove that I'm wrong, the worst solar flare in world history is going to hit us and take out all of our electronics and electricity, at least most of them, in probably the northern hemisphere. And you'll be unable to survive unless you can find free-flowing fresh water. And unless you can find food that is freely growing and in a community that can help you survive what's coming. A lot of people are going to die. A lot of people when that happens. Anyway, I'm John Little, and this has been the ShockCast for Saturday, June 9th, 2018. I hope you have a good weekend, and I pray that your pastors give you the words that you need to hear so that the coming week will be blessed and that you will have the spiritual nourishment you need to meet the challenges that God has for you in the coming days. I'll see you next week.